You get a skill point, you get a skill point, and you all get a skill point. Hey guys, MrPokke here, back with another video. Hanya is a 4-star physical harmony support that seeks to generate skill points while providing excellent buffs. By being the first ever support unit with a skill point positive skill, Hanya certainly brings a lot to the table when it comes to team building flexibility as well as her support usage. As with any support, Hanya can be easily slotted into most if not all team comps. Players who are still struggling with a good support unit like Bronya, Silver Wolf should definitely consider getting themselves a copy of Hanya even if they're not going for RGT. This complete and comprehensive guide will go through her general kit, eidolons, energy thresholds, relics, lightcones, as well as team composition. So without further ado, let's get into today's content. Jumping straight into her abilities, Hanya's basic attack is Oracle Brush, but due to Hanya's skill having the innate nature of being skill point positive, we will almost never use Hanya's basic attack unless we are faced with very rare situations of either poor skill point management or enemy mechanics that actually rob us for skill points like Fantilia's flowers. But going into a skill, Samsara Locked, it is where we deal 240% of Hanya's attack to a single enemy, then applies burden. And for every 2 basic attacks, skill or ultimate, we will regenerate 1 skill point and can be triggered up to 2 times. Now this is Hanya's core ability by being the first skill point positive skill that can and should be used every single turn, not only to generate more skill points but also to have a higher energy increase. This skill in particular is inclusive of itself, meaning we only need 1 more action after Hanya's skill to generate our very first skill point. Aside from the very first instance where we use Hanya's skill, this skill point generation only happens after 2 basic skill or ultimate when used upon an enemy. If a DPS turn takes place right after Hanya and there's no skill point left, then we cannot use a skill before generating a skill point, and hence our DPS will be forced to use a basic attack. However, we can combat this by using any damaging ultimate on a target such as Pella or Fusion to quickly replenish a skill point for our DPS if you're ever faced with this scenario. Moving on to Hanya's ultimate 10 Lord's Decree or Shall Obey, we increase the target speed by 20% of Hanya's total speed as well as attack by 60%, lasting up to 2 turns. Now, this is a powerful single target buff that encompasses both speed and attack percentage. Note that this is based on Hanya's total speed, meaning a 144 speed Hanya, which is essentially Hanya with a traces as well as 1 speed boots, absolutely no speed subs, will provide a 28.8 speed buff, while 200 speed Baya can provide a massive 40 speed buff. Unlocking Hanya's E4 further pushes this ultimate to a 3-turn buff instead of a 2-turn buff, creating 100% uptime, assuming our DPS isn't faster than Hanya, which shouldn't happen because Hanya should be really fast. Now, some players may see Hanya's ultimate as a weaker version of Asta's entire kit, who can provide a team-wide 70% attack buff as well as a team-wide 50 speed buff. This is a result of players failing to account for Hanya's skill point positivity as well as damage increase from a talent, as it is described right here at Sanction. When an ally uses a basic attack, skill or ultimate on an enemy with burden, their damage dealt is increased by 30% for 2 turns. But this is not to be confused with vulnerability or damage taken increase. That is a debuff, and this is strictly a damage percentage buff, similar to how all of our light cones, all of our elemental spheres increase our damage percentage. Allies only obtain the buff when we hit a target with burden, but that being said, this damage increase happens before the first hit is registered. So even when our unit did not receive Hanya's damage percentage buff, the very first hit will still gain the benefit of this 30% damage increase. So players don't have to worry about our very first instance not getting this damage percentage. And lastly, Hanya's technique Netherworld Judgment applies burden to a random enemy based on the skill. Not very useful since Hanya will almost be the first unit to act due to her high speed, meaning that she can apply burden immediately, and she should be applying burden immediately once the battle begins without impacting our damage output. Going on to her traces, her total minor traces comes up to 9 speed, 28% attack and 10% HP. The 9 speed is the real winner here, equivalent to roughly 5 speed subs that rose. Considering that not only are faster supports always better to improve our skill point and energy regeneration tempo, Hanya's ultimate is also tied to a total speed inclusive of this 9 speed, so having this additional speed definitely helps Hanya a lot. Next, Scrivenger. Allies triggering burden skill point recovery have their attack increased by 10% for 1 turn. This is a minor 10% attack buff, not extremely impactful, but it is a welcome addition, meaning that Hanya's total buff values at E0 Traces level 10 is now 70% attack, 30% damage, and an ample amount of speed based on her speed stat, so it is a nice bonus to have. Next, Netherworld. When enemies with burden are defeated, if the burden skill point recovery triggers count is less, 1 or fewer, additionally recovers 1 skill point, and this is mainly for our DPS if we were to kill the enemy before fully utilizing the skill point recovery. And this is extremely useful trace because it allows Hanya to generate the full 2 skill points if our DPS kills the target when they follow immediately with the next attack, even if our counter has 2 skill points remaining, as seen from this chart created by the CM bros here. However, this will not work if Hanya is the one who killed the target, and this will only result in refunding 1 skill point. This will not go beyond the original 2 skill point threshold. Hanya will always be recovering only 2 skill points. The last trace reanimated, when the burden skill point recovery effect is triggered, this character generates 2 energy, and it is also an extremely important trace to guarantee Hanya a 3-turn ultimate rotation, in which we will discuss below. Assuming each skill point recovery is fully utilized, this translates to a 12 energy recovered before accounting for energy regeneration, which can further increase the total energy. Talking about her helpful tips, the first of all being Hanya is one of the fastest unit in the entire game. Having one of the fastest base speed at 110 with an additional 9 of her traces, players can easily attain more than 134 speed, in fact going to 144 speed with just speed boots alone, making her extremely easy to gear for new players looking to build Hanya. But with that being said, since Hanya's ultimate is tied to her total speed, it will be the player's best interest to give Hanya as much speed as humanly possible, preferably 160, 170, or even some really good speed gears. Even 200 speed, but Hanya can be manageable. Next, Hanya does not need heavy trace investments. Similar to my previous point, just like Pella and Asta, the only 2 important traces that Hanya need, not including the 3 major traces, are her talent and ultimate to improve our DPS damage output, since improving Hanya's skill doesn't change our buffs whatsoever. If players are building a normal Hanya with an overweight on speed, HP and defense, then one can completely ignore upgrading her skill and still achieve excellent results when it comes to the buffs she can provide to our DPS. Players can also forsake the stat boost, particularly the attack percentage as well as the HP percentage, as long as they unlock Hanya's speed subs, making Hanya an extremely easy unit to build for new players. But that being said, point number 3 is that Hanya's skill has a really high multiplier. Following up from the previous point, if players do level Hanya's skill to level 10, it will have a 240% damage multiplier. Considering that we will be using this every single turn, ideally, it is one of, if not the highest damaging skill on a support unit, surpassing even Silver Wolf's skill at 196%, losing only to Asta at 250% on a single target, assuming there is no bounce. So if players want to build a sub DPS Hanya, they could consider it, but only after having sufficient speed. And personally, I would recommend you players to stay away from building a sub DPS Hanya, because your main objective is to give Hanya as much speed as humanly possible. Now moving on to Hanya's Eidolons, her E1, when an ally of Hanya's ultimate defeats an enemy, Hanya's action is advanced forward by 15% and can be triggered once per turn. It is a slight bump to improve Hanya's battle rotations, but however, since we are opting for an extremely fast Hanya, this 15% action value advance is not as impactful as compared to the action value advance on slower units due to how speed works. A 15% action value advance is much more valuable for a unit with say 100 speed as compared to the unit with 200 speed. It is quite literally half the effectiveness, and Hanya is going to be closer to the 200 speed, so it is not a very important thing for Hanya. As for E2, after using the skill, Hanya's speed increases by 20% for 1 turn, and this additional speed buff will also be taken into account regarding how much speed her ultimate gives to our ally. And since we are going to be using Hanya's skill every single turn, it is a great quality of life to make players Hanya even faster in game. Eidolon 4 truths, the ultimate's duration is additionally extended for 1 turn. This is Hanya's game-changing Eidolon. Assuming that our Hanya is fast enough and can maintain a 3-turn ultimate rotation, this will allow our beneficiary, ideally our DPS, to have a 100% uptime on Hanya's ultimate buff, and this will be Hanya's most important Eidolon, even more so than the Eidolon 6, which is increasing the damage boost effect of the talent by an additional 10%. So instead of a 30% damage buff, you now have a 40% damage buff. It is not as impactful as the Eidolon 4, and similar to how her Eidolon 1 and 2 functions, it just provides a further bump on our final damage output for our main DPS. So in summary, Eidolon 4 is Hanya's most important Eidolon, but at Eidolon 0, Hanya is perfectly viable since the remaining Eidolons, namely E1, E2 and E6, they are all tied to inflated buff multipliers and no impact on Hanya's energy thresholds and relic investments whatsoever. Now going on to Hanya's energy thresholds, Hanya's ultimate is at a whopping 140 energy cost, but with an optimal setup, she can easily achieve a 3-turn ultimate due to a trace reanimated that provides an additional 12 energy, assuming full skill point recovery. So this kind of reminds me of how Argenti has a 180 energy for its enhanced ultimate cost, but he can still very comfortably do a 3-turn ultimate cycle. Players shouldn't be so quick to dismiss that, oh, they have a very high energy cost and therefore we're not going to be having our ultimate every 3 turns. Now note, there may be situations where we do not get the 2 skill points from Hanya's skill, often due to Hanya being too fast and not enough damaging hits for the target. So consider that other supports need a turn to cast their buffs, especially on the very first turn. This may slightly impact Hanya's rotation, especially when our supports do not have a damaging ultimate to ensure that 4 hits, including her skill, is triggered to generate the 2 skill points for our team. So taking a look into the rotations, there are 2 most important rotations for us, namely one with Bronya's signature Lightcone and one with Memories of the Past or Coggers. So with Bronya's Lightcone, energy regeneration rope as well as a 5% energy boost from either Penacony or Von Weg, we will have a perfect 3-turn ultimate cycle, and this is the best in slot for the highest amount of damage, highest amount of value for our entire team. Because as you can see here, our basic rotation with 3 turns is 5 energy from our ultimate refund, 90 from our 3 skill usage, as well as 12 energy from triggering our talents 6 times, coming up to a total of 107. As a result, with Bronya's Lightcone, we can perfectly cast a 3-turn ultimate, and ideally we want to speed tune on DPS behind Hanya for higher damage percentage, but this is realistically extremely difficult due to Hanya's demand for speed, as well as not to mention we do have an action value advance on Hanya's kit, so players don't really need to worry about this. We can forsake the 5% energy regeneration, opt for kill or fleetless if our Hanya gets hit once over 3 turns. Now if players do not have Bronya's signature Lightcone, or if you guys want to very comfortably cast Hanya's ultimate every 3 turns without using the 5% energy regeneration set, then we can go for S5 Memories of the Past or Coggers for a very fluid 3-turn rotation by casting our skill every single turn. And lastly, just a little side note, what happens if we were to equip Hanya with an S5 Bronya Lightcone? Can she cast her ultimate every 2 turns? Unfortunately, that is not the case because we only do get back 103.95 energy, which is way too far from a 2-turn ultimate. So if players own 2 Bronya Lightcones, namely one Bronya Lightcone with S1 and one Bronya Lightcone with S5, we should be reserving Bronya's S5 Lightcone for other supports like Ting Yun, Bronya herself, or even Asta, because we do have minimal benefits for Hanya since she does not gain any benefits from the additional energy regeneration. So in summary, Bronya's Lightcone with full energy regeneration can guarantee a 3-turn ultimate, and if players do not have this setup, then S5 Memory of the Past or Coggers is going to be the next ideal thresholds for players to achieve. Next, when it comes to Hanya's relic set, like I mentioned earlier just now in helpful tips, Hanya is really easy to raise, not only in her traces but also in her relics as well, as you can see over here. Hanya's primary purpose is to be as fast as humanly possible to increase the speed given on her ultimate, which is the only skillable stat in her entire kit, and as a result, Hacker Space perfectly synergizes with Hanya being the only 2-piece that provides a 6% speed buff. Players can also opt for 4-piece Musketeer if they have an excellent speed sub on their 4-piece Musketeer, but it is more restrictive as the 6% speed is locked behind the 4-piece effect instead of a 2-piece effect. Other alternative 2 pieces like Longevous and Guard can increase Hanya's survivability, can also be considered for the player base, but they are not as important as achieving the highest possible speed subs that you can find with a rainbow set, while ensuring that Hanya can survive a battle. As long as you have very high speed, she is good to go. And then with regards to a planetary set, Von Weg and Penacony is going to be her ideal 2-piece for players running Hanya with the S1 Bronya Lightcone. This is to help her maintain her 3-turn ultimate without any hiccups. Von Weg for general usage and Penacony for a physical DPS like Argenti. For players running Hanya with Coggers or Memories of the Past, the 5% energy is no longer needed, so a more offensive 2-piece like Fleetless or Kill can be used. Remember to always keep 30% effect rest for Kill if we are going to be using this. Now with regards to main and substats, as long as Hanya has ER rope with speed boots and speed substats, everything else is not that important since they are all tied to our ultimate speed buff. So durability will be our next priority, and as a result, HP and defense percentage will be preferred. So you can see over here, our chest we will have HP or defense, speed boots, energy rope, and HP or defense sphere. Then our subset priority at the highest is going to be the speed, followed by HP and defense for more durability, and then some effect rest and break effect. At this point, I also want to mention if players do want to build like a sub DPS Hanya due to a very high multiplier on skill, then we will be switching out the HP and defensive substats and main stats into a more crit oriented build. But like I said, this is definitely not our main concern. We do want to have Hanya as fast as possible, and only when we achieve a very fast Hanya, then can players consider to swap out to a more offensive oriented build. Moving on into Hanya's Lightcone. The number one is gonna be, like I mentioned, S1, but the battle isn't over. Bronya's Lightcone at S1 maintains Hanya's Treason ultimate, 143 energy guaranteed with energy regeneration rope as well as Von Weg or Penacony. And ideally, we want to speed him on DPS to be right behind Hanya for the damage percentage given to our DPS, although it is really hard to achieve, so don't sweat about it. S1 Bronya Lightcone is perfectly viable, and additional superimpositions has very minimal effects since Hanya cannot gain like a 2-turn ultimate with the extra energy regeneration. And moving on, S5 Planetary Rendezvous. It is the best in slot for Argent or any future physical DPS due to a permanent 24% damage buff, although there will be issues in maintaining a 3-turn ultimate. However, this is not as impactful if the DPS in use is a burst damage dealer, and an excellent example being Argent. Since Argent doesn't really need 100% buff coverage, we don't really care about it as long as the buff provided by Hanya's ultimate is in place during Argent's enhanced ultimate. Since, like I mentioned, in Argent's CN analysis, that 70 to 80% of Argent's damage output is all tied to his enhanced ultimate. So during the time outside of Argent's enhanced ultimate, players are not losing a lot of damage even if we do not have Hanya's buffs on Argent at that specific moment. As long as you have Hanya's buffs on Argent when he's about to cast his enhanced ultimate, then it is perfectly okay. Moving on to another alternative, S5 Memories of the Past or S5 Meshing Cogs. Like I mentioned previously in Energy Threshold, this will guarantee a 3-turn ultimate, but there's no other additional effect. So from a strictly damage output perspective, CN heavily prefers Bronya's Signature Lightcone than these two alternatives due to the additional skill point, higher base stats, and some possible damage percentage increase while still maintaining a 3-turn ultimate. But players without Bronya's Signature Lightcone 1, or if you just want to not run Fleetless, not one Penacony or Von Weg, then these two Lightcone can definitely be a consideration. There's some other Harmony Lightcones like Carve the Moon, Dance, Past and Future. They are viable but not as optimal as compared to a guaranteed 3-turn ultimate by Bronya's Signature 1 or Coggers and Memories of the Past. Planetary also has a much higher damage percentage uptime, while Dance is not as useful since Hanya will now have a 4-turn ultimate duration. So in summary, Bronya's Signature Lightcone is the best in slot, followed by Coggers and Memories of the Past if players do not have this, and we can be running Planetary Rendezvous for a physical DPS. Very straightforward and not much explanation needed. Moving on to Hanya's team compositions. Like most of our current supports, Hanya is extremely flexible due to the skill point positivity, damage percentage, attack percentage, and speed buff. Players can treat Hanya as a side grade to Asta or Pella, with all three of them having very low investment costs, especially in terms of tracers and relics, as well as universal applications with a multitude of different team comps. Now, when it comes to an optimal team comp, Hanya shines the most with units that have a high skill point consumption, notably Imbibitor Lune as a DPS and Huo as a sustain. Hanya also likes units with damaging ultimates like Pella and Fusion to help trigger burden more easily instead of fully relying on the DPS to trigger burden skill point recovery. On the other hand, Hanya is less optimal with HP scaling DPS like Blade, a low skill point consumption DPS like Jingliu, or DPS sub DPS setup like Topaz or Kafka and Sampo DOT comps, since Hanya's ultimate only buffs a single DPS, although the damage percentage from Hanya's talent can be given to all teammates. So taking a look at some of the sample teams, one of it being the Argent Hyper Carry, running Argent with Hanya, Huo, and Tingyun. This will allow Huo to continuously cast a skill without facing a lot of skill point issues, and Hanya can run Planetary Rendezvous to further increase Argent's damage. Huo's ultimate energy increase also helps Hanya to maintain a 3-turn ultimate, despite the fact that Hanya is now running a Planetary Rendezvous. So they do have a very perfect synergy with one another in this department. Another hyper carry comp is going to be Imbibitor Lune, similar to the above comp but with even more skill point consumption from Imbibitor Lune. The damaging ultimates from Pella and Fusion here also further guarantees skill point generation, making sure that we have a lot of skill points to freely give it to Imbibitor Lune without facing any issues casting his 3 skill point enhanced basic attack every single turn. Lastly, it's going to be a Silei Ultra Carry team comp. No sustain needed once our damage is high enough, and Hanya and Pella helps with skill point generation, while Silei and Bronya destroys all targets with their incredible damage output. And with that, we've come to the end of Hanya's CN unit analysis. Really quick, really short, and really concise. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section, and if you guys want to engage in further discussions, feel free to hop on my Discord, Pokke's Village, where we have a very active community talking about honkaistarrail on a daily basis. If you guys want to check out my stream, that's gonna be twitch.tv/MrPokke, where I'll be streaming 2 to 3 times a week, and the schedule will be updated on Discord as well. That's all I have for today. All the best for your Argent and Hanya pools, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.